in Hooker's Corner, I wrote that Josh Heupel can indeed get a discount like Nick Saban did, Jimmy, but he gets it for the culture, and he gets it for eventually the number of players he's going to produce for the NFL, which is what got Saban his discount. Do you think that will be as effective as Saban's quick move to the NFL?
Yeah, but I think it might be one-sided. It might be more toward offensive players than defensive players. Now, having said that, I think Tennessee's going to have several defensive players drafted next year. I think they've done a really good job in that regard. But with Heupel, it might lean more toward quarterbacks. It might lean more toward running backs. It might lean more toward wide receivers being drafted. So I think he could get a discount in that regard. You mentioned the culture. Look, these guys have fun playing at Tennessee. It's an aggressive style. It's an up-tempo style. They even have fun playing defense that way because they are aggressive. Sometimes maybe too aggressive given the lack of talent and inability to cover people in the secondary. But yeah, I'll agree with that. But I think it would be more leaning toward offense than defense. Whereas under Saban, I think he produced a relatively equal number of pro prospects on offense and defense.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So Jimmy, to that point, with the Heupel discount, do you think, and we talk culture, Heupel's building a very player-friendly culture. I think we can all agree with that here. Mm-hmm. Do you think that player-friendly culture, though, can win maybe at least one, but do you think it could win it's ever capable of winning multiple national championships in college football, or do you have to be really a grinder and just a really hard A to do that?
Hard.
I was trying to think of how to paraphrase that last comment. I think
close quote.
Okay, so here's the way I look at that. So Tom Osborne was a nice guy. He won 3 national championships in 4 years at Nebraska. But Caleb, to your point, the atmosphere around college football has changed. It has changed, and you almost have to be a Saban or a Kirby Smart or somebody that's a grinded out, hard nosed, in your face kind of guy. I can't think of too many quote nice guys since Osborne that have won a national championship. So I think it is harder to do that. Now, if you're a nice guy and you got the best players in the country, you can win it. But I do think it's harder. Typically, you don't see the nice guys win. You see a lot of nice guys flame out. What was that coach they had at Arkansas that was 2-0? Was it Chad Morris? What was his name?
Chad Morris. Yes.
Oh my gosh, 2-10. Yes,
nicest guy in the world.
Nicest guy.
Oops. So you have a few of those along the way. So I do think it's harder if you have the nice guy, great culture, fun atmosphere, than if you have, as opposed to the Georgia or even Michigan last year or Alabama, what we've seen in recent years. You know what? Where would you rank Dabo Swinney at Clemson? Nice guy?
Well, that's what I was going to get to, actually. Jimmy and I've worked together. Dabo Swinney has done it. He's won 2 championships. Is that the best comparison out there to perhaps Josh Heupel's coaching style?
I think so. He's very much a player's coach. I think Heupel's a player's coach. The style might be a little different in terms of Heupel runs a much more up-tempo offense than Dabo, but Dabo tries to create the same kind of culture as Heupel, a similar culture. So, I think there's a really good comparison between those two as far as their personalities and the way they approach the game.
Yeah, I actually would have gone to Dabo Swinney too. I guess the only difference is I think Dabo is very, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing for Heupel, but Heupel's very nice and a player's coach, but I don't think he's as honest as Dabo. I think Dabo won a lot of goodwill over the years because he was so straightforward and upfront with his players. And I mean that in a nice way. He was nice to them, but he was upfront with them. And he tried to help them even if they weren't going to play. I know the story of, Jimmy, you probably remember this. I don't know if you do, Dave, but when Kelly Bryant lost his starting job to Trevor Lawrence, Dabo gave him a heads up. Look, you're probably not going to start here again, but tell me where you want to go and I'll make some calls and I'll help you try to find another landing spot in the portal. And I think things like that bought Dabo a lot of goodwill over the years. What about somebody like, I'm not going to count Ed Orgeron or Gene Chizik.
Caleb, can I jump in on just for 1 second on on the Sweeney thing, and with
Yes, sir.
what you were talking about, as far as the approaches and how they handle NIL, they've been far different. Has Dabo been too nice and too honest and saying, I hate NIL? He's changed his tune a little recently, but Jimmy, he pretty much discounted it. And I thought that turned a lot of people off in recruiting.
Do you remember what he said at the Orange Bowl? That he did not so much NIL. He did not want to go out and get a lot of players in the transfer portal because he did not want to recruit over the current players that he had. He wanted to develop them. Now, the Clemson players that we interviewed all said, boy, we appreciate that, and that makes us have great loyalty to our head coach. But does it make your roster better? There are some that think that Dabo is going to have trouble winning another national championship because he doesn't dive into the portal as much as he probably should or could. And I don't know that they're dishing out a lot of NIL money. So there is the concern that the current state of college football might be passing Dabo by just a little bit.
Doesn't that give him, does that increase your respect for him to a certain degree, Jimmy? Because like Dabo practices what he preaches. He's not a hypocrite with the NIL. He doesn't believe in NIL, but he also doesn't believe in the transfer portal. And therefore, even if it's to his own detriment, he's not going to take advantage of something he doesn't believe in.
Well, I respect that, but I also wonder if I'll respect his win-loss record as much over the next 3 years as I did when he was winning national championships. So there's a give and take there. I think he will continue to have success at Clemson, but I don't know if he'll ever have that success that he had where he was playing for national championships. Did he win 2 and lose 1 national championship games?
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know if he'll ever get back to that. Now, will he get in the college football playoff? I would think so. And my goodness, if he's a 5 seed, he's going to win 63-0 in his first round game. We know that. But I don't see him at the same level that he used to be because I don't think he's bringing in quite the talent level that he used to.
Maybe Dabo was ahead of the curve, Jimmy, not with NIL, but being a player's coach. When you and I worked together in the early 2000s, player's coach was practically an insult. It was like adult, I mean, that guy gets pushed around by his players. But now they have so much more leverage. Do you have to be a player's coach?
Well, I think to a degree you do. Now, I don't know, was Nick Saban a player's coach? You could argue that to a degree that he was because he always tried to improve their value. Was he hard on them? Was he, as somebody said earlier, a hard A? Yes. And there were a number of players that couldn't handle it and left the program. Now, a lot of them left because they weren't getting playing time either. So I think you can be hard-nosed and still be a player's coach if you have the – look at Rodney Garner. I think he's very hard-nosed, but the players love him. They may not love him during the 90 minutes of practice they got, but off the field, he shows them that he cares about them. So I think you can be both in terms of being hard-nosed and still be a player's coach. Having said that, though, I think Heupel really is a player's coach. Remember the first thing he did when he came to Tennessee as a coach? Okay, he had a lot of unhappy players. What's missing here? What do y'all want to do? We need to make this fun again. Nobody wants to come to the practice. Nobody wants to come into the office and talk to coaches. So he had, I don't know, handball games, flag football. He went bowling, whatever. They did a lot of team unity things, which I think was a smart thing to do. I think it brought those players together, and they wanted to play for him. And I think Dabo probably does the same thing at Clemson.
I can't help but think which coach was it of the 3 bad ones they had in a row that on their off day, as far as a team bonding thing, they went out and drug these huge rafts around, and it was like a workout day. Jimmy, do you remember who that was? Was that Butch?
It sounds like something Butch Jones would do. Well, I say Butch never did take him on like one of those axe throwing things because he might have been in danger.
That's exactly right. Caleb, I want you to jump in here. Don't be a soft A. Go ahead and ask Jimmy the hard A questions.
It's funny because I remember, funny enough, that was the anti-Derek Dooley who said he didn't believe in all field team building stuff. He's like, we're in the room and on the field enough time during the day. I think he said something like that when and like he said, I'm not taking my staff on canoe trips. Was his exact quote.
And where is he now?
Yeah, no, that's true. You're right. What about coaches like, so now I want to go back, and Dabo is unique, but doesn't it seem like most of the players coaches we know who won national titles, they kind of stumbled into the right player? Because, like, for instance, Mac Brown, he seems like a player's coach, but he had Vince Young. Isn't it easy to be a player's coach when you have Vince Young? And I guess the only exception to that, another one that came to my mind, is Pete Carroll was a player's coach, wasn't he? And even though one sports fan, he won 2 national titles.
Right.
If you're Georgia fan, are you worried at all that the game could pass Kirby by because he's too much of a hard A?
I don't think so, because
either.
Look at the recruiting rankings on an annual basis. If he's not number 1, he's number 2. If he's not number 2, he's number 3. If you continually do that in recruiting, boy, it's hard for you to fall off the map. So I'm going to say Kirby will continue to win at a very high level as he continues to recruit at a high level.
All right. I'll tell you what, Caleb, are we ready to move on?
I was just going to ask this last question real
it.
quick. So, Jimmy, do you think Josh Heupel, if he wants to have the type of success even Dabo has, does he need to get a little bit harder on the players? Or do you think he struck the right balance?
I think he's pretty much struck the right balance. I think he's got some assistant coaches that are pretty hard on players in certain other positions. And I think he's got a good staff, although I don't know how well the new running backs coach and the new linebackers coach will fit in. But I think that we got Rodney Garner, who's pretty hard on him. I'm not a big fan of the secondary coach. I think the offensive line coach is really good. Receivers coach is really good. And I think the receivers coach is a players coach. You got a mixture of assistants that I think would be considered players coaches, although a couple of them, like Rodney Garner, are pretty hard on them as well. So I think if you got a mixture like that, it's okay for the head coach to be a player's coach. But I will say this: he's made some personnel decisions that have been interesting. I mean, you remember when he benched Jeremy Banks before the South Carolina game over 2 significant instances, one including missed practices, and then he gets into ruckus with Hendon Hooker. So he will take that stand if he needs to. He kicked off Caden Salter, a quarterback who went on to Liberty and had great success. So he will make those moves. I think he's not afraid to make a tough decision.
Jimmy, I believe firmly that a coach can come in, lay down the iron fist, and then back off a little bit if he's been too hard on a team. I think it is much more difficult to be a soft coach, a player's coach, and then get hard on a team. Any concern that Josh Heupel could face that in his career?
No, I agree with what you said, that it's much harder to be soft and then become hard on the players. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think he's done a good job with this. Now, in 5 years, am I going to change my mind on that? Depends on where they go. But I like where they are. I like the direction of this program. I know there's a lot of optimism about this upcoming season. I don't think that's something that will catch up to Heupel.
All right, there we go. Nice guy. That's good stuff. We'll see if he's able to continue with that.